Back to the Barbell Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Christina Lynn, and I'm here with my co host, Marissa Roy. And in today's episode, we are going to be talking about the qualities of a great coach.
Absolutely, because we haven't done an episode on this in maybe 3 years at this point. So really, really pumped to not only redo it, but I feel like just as we go through like topics that maybe we have covered before, like it's not fair to our listeners to be like, we've talked about this before when you'd have to scroll for like 5 minutes to get to the episode because it's at the very, very beginning of when we even started this. And I think our opinions have gotten more well informed at this point too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, it's always fun to redo an episode and just to see kind of like how any of our mentalities or philosophies have changed and shifted. And again, what we were just talking about off air was like how we came from, I mean, I think when we did the episode was close to 2020. So it's like in the competitor kind of like arena. So it's like we're definitely way more in the lifestyle kind of area now.
yeah, well, and also because we both employ assistant coaches on our team. And I think it's like when you make an episode like that, or you talk about things that make great coaches from the lens of it's just me, it's a little different because like in some ways we can't see our own blind spots as well
Mhm.
as other people can. And so now that we've employed people, it's just like we can see the strengths and weaknesses of all the people that we have like worked with and held accountable and like seen how they handle things, because then it's like, oh, I didn't even consider that this would be a trait that is important, right?
Mhm.
um so that's, I feel like, been valuable as well, is just like being able to not only look at it from the lens of like, how do I view this, but also like, what if I just like seem to work well with other coaches? Because at the end of the day, like I or we are not the absolute best at absolutely everything that we do. Like we find great people, and then those people surprise the heck out of us and show us their talents and their strengths and new things that we need to be aware of what makes a great coach.
Yeah, and it's also really interesting, again, from that perspective of hiring people because we are in the same mentorship. So we see a lot of coaches who talk about coaches like that they've employed and like the issues that they have and things like that. So it is very interesting to kind of hear hear some great stories and some not so great stories.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, without further ado, the qualities of great coaches. I really want to start with this one
Oh yeah,
because I
100%.
think it leads into everything else, but it's like you give a shit. Like, but not just like give a little shit like I like my job, but like no, this is your passion. Like this is what you live for, is coaching and helping others. And just really, really, just really caring. And like, I mean, I think a lot of great coaches, their biggest strength and weakness is their empathy and like their ability to like just feel what their clients are feeling and relate to them and connect to them on such a deep level that it feels like they are like living through this client. And that could be great. It could also like kind of shoot them in the foot because like then their emotional battery is like tanked. So you have to learn how to manage it. But I think I'd rather somebody have that and then have to teach them the management aspect versus not, because you can't coach that into someone.
Yeah, it is really hard to have someone try to care about their clients. Like that's not something you can teach.
Let me try to care.
But yeah, I think that like with everything that you do, you at the end of the day, it is what is best for your client. And if you're not leading from that mentality, that can really, really lead you astray. And so it was kind of interesting. I was, just kind of like the evolution of the fitness industry and specifically coaching. I mean, back in, you know, 2012, 2015, like not a lot of people were online coaches because there was not a lot of money that was in that industry. And it has evolved quite a bit. Now you have companies that are teaching fitness coaches how to make money. And so sometimes you'll have people that go into it for the wrong reasons. And so
Yeah.
I feel like the ones that have really been around for a long time, or, long time personal trainers who eventually go in to online coaching, it's very, very different because those people do truly care about the industry and care about their clients' success.
Yeah. Yeah. Just looking for like longevity in people. And that doesn't mean you have to have longevity in like your experience and your credentials and how many
Right.
people you've worked with. Like, I am proud to say that like I just celebrated 8 years, and that's like a huge milestone, a pretty big number in terms of like a length of a career. But it doesn't have to necessarily be that. But I think like longevity in, say, like helping others or having this be your passion. Like if you've been obsessed with fitness for a decade, but you just became a coach, I'd still look at that as like longevity for that
Oh, yeah.
person
Absolutely.
rather than like, oh, they have no merit to their name. Like, cause they've literally been living it for a decade and then they just
Yeah.
started helping others. But,
Yeah.
um, but if
Well,
someone
and then
like
there,
got fit yesterday and was like, I'm going to be a coach, I'd be like, "Ugh."
yeah, yeah, but it's the same thing. It's like, okay, well, maybe someone was an accountant for 10 years and now they want to transition to online space. It's like, well, that doesn't mean that they weren't passionate about it, because they could have been living out health and fitness for those 10 years, or just weren't
Yeah.
sure that they could make that career switch, or, whatever that may be. But yeah, it's like giving a shit about people. I think that that is the number one thing. And if you don't have that trait, or you're the person that you're looking at to hire, then I probably wouldn't wouldn't consider them.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that that's like a, and that bleeds into so many behaviors. Like,
Mhm.
and I think a lot of qualities, traits, tendencies of great coaches comes from that place. And that's just where it starts. I think it really is like, I mean, that maybe a couple other things are like basic character traits that really feed into making this a lifetime career that is sustainable for someone. So
Yeah.
then the balance of it all when you're coaching people, I think, is another one. And this is a skill. This is something that you can learn. It is not something that everybody has every aspect of. Like, I definitely don't have some aspects as much as I'd like. But in terms of like when you're communicating with your clients, you have to be able to play different roles, like wear a lot of different hats. So you can be a cheerleader, but too much of a cheerleader and you're just being a yes man. You can be tough love, but too much tough love and someone doesn't know how to exercise self-compassion and then they shoot themselves in the foot. And too many like asking great questions, leading people to their own conclusions. That's great, but too many questions, sometimes people will lead themselves the wrong way. So like you have to be able to like balance all of it, tell people hard truths, but also show that you care, but also just be a human being. And it's a lot. It's a lot to
Yeah.
balance.
And then also, if you have a roster of 30, 40, 50, 60 clients, all of those clients all operate very, very differently. And so
Mm,
then having to balance between, okay, well, this person likes more of a cheerleader. This one needs more self compassion. This one actually needs more tough love. So it's not only like managing those different hats, but it's like how that operates with every single client. And sometimes sometimes you get it wrong, unfortunately.
yeah.
Sometimes you think a client might need tough love and they were looking for compassion. Like, it is really, really difficult. But I think at the end of the day, if the client knows you care about them and you care about their well being, and they are able to communicate, hi, I didn't like this, or this isn't what I needed in the moment. I think that really, really goes a long way. But it has a lot to do with that coach client relationship, which is incredibly important.
Yeah, yeah. Because the quote, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. It's
Right.
very, very true. But how do you show them that you care? And I think it starts with actions. Like it's more than words. Like you can say that you care about somebody, but it's and that goes in like relationships and everything. Like you could say that you care, but like are your actions showing that that person's a priority or that you're seeing them, you're hearing them, or that you're tailoring the protocol around them or whatnot. So I think it comes down to how it filters into that a lot too.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. It is very interesting that dynamic between every single client. And I think the other thing too, like having someone, a coach that cares about you, doesn't mean that they're responding to you within like 1 minute, right?
Yeah,
Or
yeah,
that they're like, sending you like I don't know, like lavish gifts, but it could just be like, hey, like, how was your weekend? Or, just like checking in with you outside of just health and fitness and just like other small ways. And one of the things that we sometimes do is we have the clients do um, their love language, right? I think
Hmm.
that that's incredibly important. And it's like, well, if it's physical touch, like, sorry, this is online coaching, but it's like, hey, like an act of service versus like they like receiving gifts. So it's like for their birthday, it's like, do they want a $5 gift card to Starbucks or just like small little things like that. I think go a really long way.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And just I think too, it's like I don't know the best way to put this, but like just peopling, like just
Hmm.
being really adept at peopling. And I don't think that it takes extroversion per se, but I think it takes just people skills, just personability, being able to connect with others. I think is a really, really big piece that can make you successful in coaching because, like you said, it all starts with like, did we build a good relationship at the foundation? And then from there, we can have all these like positive communication benefits from all of that. But we can't do that if there's no relationship established up front. So I feel like it's just the people skills, the communication skills that allow you to get to a deeper relationship with someone really fast.
Yeah, because you can be the smartest person, like the absolute best coach when it comes to like knowledge and, all this stuff. But if you can't communicate that, like that
Yeah.
doesn't mean shit when you're coaching people.
Yeah, if we're like so
So
like just awkward as fuck, like
yeah, which is something that we like the mistake that we made as young coaches, right? Where it's like we thought that the more information and education that we shared, the smarter that made us look and the more professional. And not realizing at the time it's like they don't need all that information. Like what is the bare bones, the bare
they actually
necessities? Like
really don't care.
no, they're just like, how do I achieve my goal? I don't care about like all this stuff. So yeah, being able to communicate very effectively and get your point across, and that is way more important than how much knowledge you have.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and then I think we kind of already touched on empathy, but I think just with the communication, the peopling, like something that's secondary to that is just like attention to detail. So one thing that is really, really common in online coaching is having a check-in form that you send, and it's a Google form, it's a type form, it's something that you fill out question by question, and then you're telling your coach like how was your week. And I mean, I actually have a coach that I've been working with for a couple of months now that um he is super attention like to detail oriented. Like it's actually wild. So like I actually am more enticed to fill out every aspect of the form thoughtfully because when I get a response, he is going through it and actually attending to each of those pieces, picking out what I'm saying and really noticing the wording or the way that I'm saying it through typing, which is hard to do. But I think it's that cycle. And a lot of times, like if we've dealt with dissatisfied clients in the past, one common complaint from somebody who's a little bit less engaged in working with us as a client might be, I don't really like the check-in form. Like I don't really get a lot out of it. But I think a big part of that is responsibility on the coach to actually make that process, that back and forth enjoyable. And if someone hates filling out the check-in form, well, it's probably because they don't feel like they're getting anything from it. So if you watch a check-in video response and you're like, oh my God, like how did you just like read my mind or get all this out of it? Of course you're going to want to fill it out again. You're going to be like, what else can this person pull out of me? Like, this is kind of cool.
Yeah.
So there's always like nuggets that I get from mine. And I feel like being back in the client seat has been so fun for me because it's given me a lot of ideas and also perspective like that of like, why do people say I don't like the check-in form? It's not
Yeah.
because the questions suck. Like it's because of the experience.
Well, I've also seen some people who have talked about coaching, not necessarily with us or you, but just like just I guess kind of snarking on coaching. They're like, I don't understand. They just basically read my check-in form back to me. And I think it's interesting when you've had different coaches and you send a check-in form and then you get a, 2-sentence email back, here are your macros. Like, it's like, well, why did I just spend all that time telling you about my week if you did not care or
Yeah.
like you didn't go over anything? So you're less inclined to write things. But yeah, like when you go through and you talk about all those different areas, it is, and it's hard, right? Because you're, as the coach, you're like, well, okay, I can't spend 30 minutes, 60 minutes like on every single check-in going over every single detail, but like what are the things that stand out, like you said, what, the writing between the lines and things like that. But also one of the things that I guess actually no, we have gotten criticism from this. It's like, well, why do you care about my relationships and how work is going? And so I guess that was an issue on our part for not communicating how it's not just macros, it's not just your nutrition, and it's not just fitness. Like we take a very, very holistic approach. So we want to know how your relationships are because if you're in a huge, if you're in a divorce and things are not going very well, or, some things are going on personally, that's going to show up in other areas of your life. And that's also going to change how we coach you and the approach that we might use. So it is something that we want to take into consideration, and it really allows us to see the bigger picture and to see really what's going on rather than just, okay, how's fitness, how's nutrition.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it doesn't exist in a bubble. So yeah, just being able to pick all that out. And again, that comes back to caring. Like I care
Mm-hmm.
about the whole picture, not just like getting you this before and after photo, right? Um, so yeah. And then I think there's a line though, right, between personal and professional. So we don't want to know every detail about your entire personal life, but we do need to know if it's affecting your ability to progress in your fitness, right? And there is a lot of overlap. And so clients have joked like, oh, you've been my therapist too. Like this is basically therapy. And it's like, it's funny. There is a little bit of truth to the fact that like you're going to get a lot of like mental breakthroughs and wins and reflections back to you, and you're going to learn a lot about yourself and you're going to gain so much mentally, but it's not therapy. And there's a line between personal and professional. So we do think that also great coaches know how to toe that line, and that goes for scope of practice and how deep do we go into topics like mental health or disordered eating or anything of that nature, and personal life and all those things, and giving advice in areas that we are not certified or credentialed to do so, like couples counseling, relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Like we can advise on how to propose things about meal prep or gym scheduling to your spouse because it affects your adherence, but we're not going to give you a full 411 on conflict resolution and fighting styles and all that because that's not our scope, right? So it's like, here's some resources though, and like this is how it impacts your health and fitness. But then also, I know in the bodybuilding space, there's also been a lack of professionalism in another way, if you want to detail that.
Yeah, so I think this is kind of back, I think it was back in 2020, 2021. There was like a big hoopla going on with some coaches who were not being very professional with their clients. And again, it's like something that we didn't even really think to touch on, but because we're so far removed from that. But for someone who maybe is listening to this and they've never worked with a coach or they don't know, there is a like you're vulnerable and you have like you're in a position to be taken advantage of. So I think it is important to at least touch on this, is that your coach should be professional with you in the sense that they are working with you, because at some point we do need to see progress photos. We need to see and be able to assess if you're making changes. We want to see muscle definition, we want to see measurements and things like that, but we also want you to be comfortable. And so I always tell clients, progress photos, I'd love whatever you feel the most comfortable in, whether that's bathing suit, whether that's underwear and a sports bra. Sometimes we have clients who wear shorts or leggings. The less you have on at the end of the day, the more that we can see. Like that's just I don't know, hashtag science, but
Just a fact.
just a fact. But that doesn't mean that we need to see everything. And there should never be any sort of nude photos or partially nude photos, and your coach should never, ever, ever, ever ask for them. And I would hope that you would never send them. Even in the bodybuilding world, your coach does not need to see that. So do not ever send nudes. Do not like in the disguise of progress photos. That should be a huge red flag. That should be a huge warning. I cannot think of any scenario where that might be acceptable. So please don't ever do that. And then
Yeah.
I think another thing that kind of stems from that is because I don't think it's going to be, your first check-in where your coach asks for that. I think that a lot of times you have coaches who are being unprofessional and they will kind of groom and they will ask more and more and more. So it may not be so blatantly obvious. And that also might start with comments. So no coach should ever be calling you like baby or commenting that you're attractive or you look really hot or beautiful or pretty, or anything like that. And this is not just male coaches, this could be female coaches too. But yeah, if you're seeing any of those things, that's a huge, huge, huge red flag.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's our bodies, right? And it's so deeply tied to our self-image. And so I think a stem off of that brings us out of maybe a more bodybuilding space type of issue, not isolated too, but I would say that's where we've heard it happen,
Mhm.
and brings us out more into broad coaching too, is how is your coach encouraging you? And I think that like off of the back of that, it's like making comments about somebody's external appearance. It's not that you can't, but it's as a coach, and it's not that it's bad if people do, but it's just understanding that like most of the time comments about physical appearance um, don't go over great for most people, and you really have to know somebody and how they like to receive that feedback to like know what to say to them. Like for example, I have a client who I've been working with for 3 years, and I've seen her every year at our live event year over year in person. And last year to this year, I noticed a huge difference in body recomposition. So I told her, I said, dude, like the scale's not telling the full picture. Like, I just want you to know, like, I see a huge difference and your hard work's paying off. And that was, I think, very appropriate of just like a difference in the positive direction, the direction that we are both working towards. But I'm not going to sit there and be like, oh my God, you're so skinny. Or like, I don't know, like just like comments that like your family would make ignorantly that make you roll your eyes. Like coaches don't need to be that for people, right? And so I think one thing that is a green flag and that you should look for is if you feel like you are praised upon your character, on your work ethic, on your values, like commitment and discipline and resilience. Like if somebody is telling you that as a coach that you are resilient and you are committed and you are exemplifying these characteristics, then that is a great compliment, right? It's like
Yeah.
you can't be mad about that. And I think it's just a great coach is sensitive to the fact that it not only lands better for people, but it's actually more effective in reinforcing positive behavior, with the client actually adhering to the goals for themselves. Because if they hear, wow, I'm a committed person, they're going to start to think, I'm a committed person. What does a committed person do? They are committed. So they do better as a whole.
And to stem off of that, it's the same thing where it's like instead of saying as a coach, "Oh wow, I'm so proud of you," like,
Mhm.
"Wow, I hope you're really proud of yourself."
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that makes a huge difference because we don't want clients that come to us with check-ins trying to make us proud. We
Yeah.
want them to be doing things for themselves. So it's just small little phrases, little tweaks here and there.
Yeah.
And then again, it's like giving the power to the client. And like, we'll say something like, I can't believe how much progress you've made. And sometimes we'll get clients who be like, no, it's all you. And it's like, I didn't do anything. You were the one who went to the gym. You were the one who prepped your meal. Like you did that. That is all on you. I just gave you some direction, but you had everything inside of you to make that transformation. And that is
Yeah.
incredibly, incredibly empowering, but you're not lying. You're not manipulating. It's
Mhm.
100% true.
Yeah. And I think it's the difference between we language and you language, because I think there's a place for we language too, but I don't think it's in the praise sector, right?
Right.
Because
Agreed.
it's not like we did that. It's like, no, you did that. But the struggles, like we will get through this together. Like being selective with that, because it's like, okay, now that client doesn't feel alone, feels like you're on a team with somebody, and they, maybe if you can't pull yourself up all the way, they can help pull you out of it. So I think it's just like, yeah, super subtle nuances when it comes to coaching of how do we help people help themselves with their behavior, and things like that. Being choosy with our we language versus our you language, it can be really, really impactful for somebody's reinforcement and their behavior.
Yeah. And that's also like, I think it's important as a coach to be able to say, hey, I made a mistake, and not
Yeah.
like, hey, we made a mistake or something like that. Being able to accept personal responsibility and have that extreme ownership if something didn't go wrong. And I think that sometimes what happens is, we hire coaches because we think that they're experts, which they are. But sometimes, like we talked about
Not
earlier,
always.
not always. But also sometimes coaching is us making a best guess. And I think it's important that we kind of communicate that, like, hey, I think this is the direction we should go in because of XYZ, or, whatever that may be. But a lot of times with coaching, it's like we're kind of experimenting. And sometimes we might make the wrong decision. Like,
Yeah.
I, I don't know. We might say, hey, let's go this route, and we don't, or vice versa. But being able to say, hey, I'm sorry, like I made a mistake. Like this wasn't like, let's go a different direction. But at the same time, it's like if we learn that maybe you didn't respond or this didn't go well, okay, well now we know that didn't work. And now we have
Mhm.
that in our toolkit for next time. But I think it's important as a coach to admit, hey, I made a mistake, or this was the wrong call here.
Yeah, just the transparency in that. And this is what I always love to say is my quote. I can say that this is me, but coaching is just an educated game of trial and error. And so
Exactly.
you're paying somebody to make better decisions than you would on your own in the game of trial and error of figuring out how your body responds to things, because your body is dynamic and constantly keeping you guessing. And so with that, it's going in with your eyes wide open of the understanding that your coach doesn't know everything. They can't fix you. But what we can do is just be transparent as coaches and say, all right, I am not 100% certain about this, but based on the information that I have and the pros and the cons of the directions that we could go, I want to try this. You have, but also like giving options. I think great coaches give options too. Of like, we could also go this way. We see this happen a lot with like fat loss specifically, right? Like clients often always want to just dive right into fat loss. And sometimes I found the best approach is not just saying like, no, we can't right now, is instead being like, all right, listen, we can do that. Here's what it would look like though. And here's the pros and cons to that. And then if we were to go the direction that I think is best, this is what it would look like. This is kind of how it will pan out, timeline and pros, cons, everything. I think it is going to be better for you in the long run. But I mean, at the end of the day, I'm going to support your choice no matter what. But I am heavily biased because of the experience I've had working with X amount of people, this amount of circumstances. But I will support you regardless. And I think a great coach knows that sometimes people will take that and be like, okay, I trust you, let's go. And sometimes people will be really hard headed and they have to kind of learn by falling flat on their face and at least being guided the best way possible in something like that. But then being like, okay, you're right. Okay, let's do it your way. I get it. I get it. That's
Yeah.
happened a number of times, and I think it's just it's just knowing like where how to toe that line with people, because like it's respecting your clients' autonomy and independence to make decisions for themselves, but
Mhm.
also like being that educating voice in their corner.
Right. Yeah. And I think that sometimes, and this is why even coaches have coaches, because we are biased and we sometimes are very focused on one aspect of things. And so it's really nice to have someone come in and look at that big picture. And that's what coaches do, is they're like, I hear that you want to lose 5 or 10 pounds by summer, but I also know that your ultimate goal is to not have to diet again. And you want to get out of this yo-yo cycle of dieting during the summer, gaining it back during the winter, and you doing it again and again and again and again. So again, exactly like you're saying, I hear you want to diet. However, this is where I think that we should go. And again, it's like, I will support you. But that is the great thing about having that coach, is they are able to see big picture, and they are able to kind of zoom out and try to do what they think is best for your long-term health.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have two more, and I want to make sure we get through these because these are big ones. So, um, leading yourself first. And so this is where maybe it gets a little controversial, but I don't think it will, because I know what I mean by this, and I'm just going to try to articulate it as best I can. But leading yourself first, walking the walk, living a healthy and fit lifestyle, and never doing something or never asking someone to do something that you have not done yourself or would not do. And I think this is where, and pause, because don't jump at me for this yet. I do think there is something to the whole, like, I'm a personal trainer, I'm an online coach, and I want to look the part sort of thing. Now, that does not mean you need to be shredded and ripped and this Instagram model and you need to look this exact certain type of way. What I mean is, typically when you walk the walk and you are putting in all of the time, the energy to practice what you preach truly to the highest grade of your own personal integrity. And I mean, not cutting corners, like really living it out. Typically your body is a reflection of that. And exact body fat percentage, exact way that it looks, I don't care. That's not what I mean. And I am very supportive of all different types of shapes, sizes, bodies, muscularity, body fat percent. But it's just, you got to be walking the walk. You got to be doing the inner work. You got to be prioritizing yourself and pushing yourself in your health and fitness journey to be ahead of your clients and to lead by example and to have those experiences that you can empathize with your clients on, of like, yeah, it is really hard to get up at this time and go to the gym, but I did it. So you can do it too. Right. And just being able to live that. And I think that it's like, it's tough because like we live and breathe it all day. So it could be exhausting to do it more ourselves, but it ultimately fuels our tank to be able to pour into others. So hopefully that lands well. Like, it's not look this way, it's just walk the
Right.
walk.
It's not shredded to the bones, or you have abs, or you need to look like you just stepped off stage. That's not it. But I think that also goes not just physically. So it's not just the fact that you're going to the gym or you're getting your steps, or you're drinking your water, but also how do you take care of yourself mentally? And so
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of what we talked about earlier with like boundaries. It's like if you have a coach who's responding to you at 1, 2 in the morning, or is going out and drinking on the weekends, or is like their life is in shambles, like
Yeah.
they're not leading like that other side of things. So, um, we've had coaches who, because it's like, how do you as a coach try to implement boundaries, or like tell a client, hey, you need to implement boundaries. You need to do that. If you're responding within 1 minute, if you're always on your phone, if you are never off work, if you're not doing anything that you need to do, you're not going to the gym, you're not eating your food, all those things. It's like you can't be a role model for others, and your clients are going to see that.
Yeah.
And so it's very hypocritical for you to say, hey, you need to be setting boundaries, when they're like, coach, you don't do that.
And
So
you
that
sent me
could be,
that text at 3 a.m. Okay, sure.
yeah. And so that's kind of what we talked about earlier about like being timely with correspondence and check-ins. Like, that's, again, it's not that your coach has to get back to you within 2 minutes of responding to your email or whatever, but they should be getting back within 24 hours, because that's a boundary that they've set with you. Hey, like, I'm saying that I'm going to do this within this amount of time, and they're sticking to it. But yeah, so I think that that's really important. And then the same thing, like if you have a client, or someone who's not doing well mentally, but then you don't do anything, you're not journaling or you're not seeing a therapist or you're not doing anything, like you're not doing that internal work, it's hard to say something with conviction to a client and have them try to implement it. So I think it is really important to walk the walk, both physically, mentally, work-life boundaries and all those things.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I think the last thing kind of is like a 2-for-1 sort of deal, because it's always learning, always be learning. And that could mean a couple things. I think number one, it's like you want to be learning, like you want to be fueling your mind with new information about this because it's your passion and you love it, but also because your perspective is always changing. It's never one way or the highway. It's I'm always learning because I could always be wrong about something, and I could always change my perspective or my approach for what's best for the client. Right. And so, like, it just comes back to that passion of giving a shit and like just like wanting to do this because we love it. We love helping people. We love absorbing this information. Like there's never enough, and it's all for the better of other people and for a healthier world. So it's like just such positive energy to feed into. So always be learning.
Yeah, always be learning. And I think it's really interesting because I think that you see a lot of coaches who fall onto one or two extremes. It's kind of like um, what does the research say, right? What does science say? And then you have the other side where it's like, but what does my experience working with clients in the real world say? And I think a nice, healthy blend of those two things is nice because it's like, yes, we want to do things that are most optimal, but then also what am I seeing with my clients that may kind of counteract some of the research that I'm seeing. But yeah, it's always learning and just kind of adding more tools to your toolbox because that just makes you a better coach in the long run. Because that just means that you're more equipped to handle certain situations with clients that you come across. But again, I think at the end of the day, it's just that passion for coaching. That on your downtime, like you're listening to podcasts like these, or you are reading research studies, or you're subscribed to certain things where you're getting updates, and that's just where your passion lies. It's in the health and fitness industry, and just having fun with it. And I think that that's really at the end of the day, it's like, I mean, I know that you and I feel the exact same way, that it's like, I cannot believe how incredibly blessed that we are, that our passion is our job and it is our career, and we get to blend those two things. And yeah, it is incredibly frustrating some days, but at the end of the day, it's like we wake up every single day and do what we love. And it's like, I could not ask for anything better.
Yeah. Yeah. Just being grateful for that. Like, yeah, there's going to be days that suck, but at the end of the day, like, I would not take it any other way. I wouldn't want to go to corporate America. So,
Yeah.
yeah, comes back to passion, I think is number one.
Yeah. And something else that we talked about in that first episode that we did on this topic was the always learning, because we don't want to have to die on a hill with like a certain philosophy. And so we've talked about this before. When you sign up for someone who's the keto guy, well, they're probably going to only do keto and
Yeah.
not do anything other than that. So it's just like always learning and then being able to come back and say, hey, I was wrong on this thing that I tried to implement. And, just kind of learning from those experiences. But hopefully this is a really good overview. And if you did listen to the first episode, I'd be interested to hear a little bit how maybe we might have changed some of our philosophies. But guys, we hope that you enjoyed this episode. And if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed to the podcast. You can find me on Instagram at Christy Lynn Fit. Marissa is at Marissa Roy Fitness. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we hope to see you back next week.